Hello and welcome to Not That This, the pop culture talk show where I interview artists and influencers to find out their fool's gold and hidden gems, those massively popular things that they hate, and those unknown or underrated masterpieces that they love. My name's Geraint Evans, and I approve this message. So, this is episode 11. I want you to have a creative voice in this podcast. So I'm allowing you to choose my theme tune. You're currently hearing one of the options. I'll tell you how to vote at the end of the episode. This is a really exciting show for me. I got to speak to Hannah James and Grace Petrie. Now, Grace Petrie is my first guest to have been a hidden gem on this podcast already, and that's a lot of fun for me. Also, if you've listened to episode 4, where I speak to my incredibly talented scriptwriter friend Grace Knight, then you'll know that I'm a big fan of Grace Petrie's work. Lyrically, musically and politically, she just checks all my boxes. Then there's Hannah James. Now, I'm a big folky fan, so I've been aware of Hannah for a while, mainly through her work in the bands Lady Masery and Coven, but seeing her live was the most awesome experience, and I mean that in the traditional biblical sense of the word awesome. She can fill a room, she can fill your head with this resonating music and these incredible vocals. I was blown away. This interview was recorded in a pub in Bristol, so there are moments of background noise. There was a bit of construction going on down the road, but there's nothing that gets in the way of hearing what Grace and Hannah have to say. Okay, here's the interview. Hello, Grace.
Hi.
Hello, Hannah.
Hello.
Thank you both for joining me on my podcast.
No, thanks for having us. Yeah.
Lovely. I'm meeting up with you in Bristol, a little bar. There's some construction noise in the background.
It's the only way I'll record a podcast. It's the only circumstances I'll entertain doing it in.
You're here on your tour, right? The tour you're doing together.
Yes. Yeah.
We've got gig 7 tonight. Is it?
I think so. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. In some ways,
taking a toll.
Yeah.
In some ways, it's gone really quickly, and in some ways, I can't remember life before it started.
Yeah.
But that's partially because we moved house. Have been moving house in the middle of in the middle of the tour. So
that's got to be fun.
Oh yeah, I'd really recommend it. Really recommend it. Yeah, yeah.
When we're moving house, what else should we do that week?
Yeah, sure, definitely. No, it has literally been ridiculous because this house came up. And we had to sort of go for it because it was insanely cheap for what it is. We both obviously both being musicians, we both have so much stuff. We have so much equipment and instruments and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of merch. So this big house came up that was around the corner from our little house that didn't have enough space for all our stuff. But it was only available now when we were going on tour. So it's let's do it. Yeah. So we've literally been sort of doing a gig, driving back to Leicester, moving a load of boxes until the very last possible moment that we can leave, and then getting back in the car, going and doing a gig. But it's been...
And on the last day, we actually just left our 2 friends, finishing off the cleaning in the old house.
I know. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Oh, it's good to have good friends.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. But the tour is... it's been cool. Yeah, it's been really good. Yeah, I think I would enjoy it even more if we weren't moving house in between playing shows. But yeah, it's been lovely.
Yeah,
good. We had a good one at the Folk House last night.
Yeah, it was great. Really
and off to Newport tonight to see the new Le Pub or Le Public Space as it is.
It's changed, hasn't it? Yeah. I've not been for years.
Right. Yeah. So now it's this co-op owned.
Okay.
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Yeah.
Oh, that's fun. I've only ever gigged in the downstairs bar bit next to the pool table.
Oh right. Okay.
That's an experience trying to do stand-up comedy.
I bet. Yeah. I bet.
Sorry, mate. Do you mind just moving for the? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So for the Street Fighter 2 console they have on the bar there.
So you're going to be done with this tour by the time this comes out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's quite a new thing for both of you, right? You're mixing... I mean, not genres, you're both broadly folk, right? But,
yeah.
Well, it's in your promotional material, right? You're at other ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And within folk, there's a million there's a million subgenres.
Well, just there isn't one really good definition of what folk is. I think that's part of the problem. Like, people see it as loads of different things.
Yeah.
And we definitely come from, you know, two quite different definitions of what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've got, like, you know, bands that play for, like, Kaylee's, and, you know, like, or play, or, you know, like, Hannah does a lot of folk dancing, like clog dancing and step dancing and stuff, and then, yeah. So, no, I mean, what I had always interpreted as folk and, like, what folk had meant in my life, because I didn't grow up on the folk scene like Hannah did. So, like, the kind of immersion in like what people would regard as sort of proper English folk music is a really new thing in my life. It's only the last sort of 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So growing up, what I thought of as folk was like your Bob Dylans and your Joni Mitchells.
Right, yeah.
And I really, you know, that was like a definition of folk that I very much identified with. So I'd been calling myself a folk singer for years and years and years, and not really understanding why there was this like apartheid in folk where people would sort of like not regard me as folk. And then I kind of, well, I met Hannah through a project that we both do called Coven, which is a 6-piece lineup of me and Hannah's band Lady Masery and Ahuli and Tito, who are a wonderful piano singing duo. And so through that project, I got exposed to like quite a lot more like traditional folk music, and I was like, yeah, no, this is nothing like what I do. I can totally understand why they were like, you're not folk, because yeah, by those standards, I'm definitely not folk.
Yeah.
But like Hannah says, you know, there's loads and loads of different ways of defining it, and people, and it's just one of those things. It's like, how long is a piece of string? What is folk music? What is it? It just totally depends who you're asking. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Hannah, you do it really, because what I'm interested in with you, I love what you do, right? I grew up in the car with my dad. He had all these old school folk cassette tapes. Getting old. But what I'm curious about is you are a young person, right?
Getting less so. Yeah. With every passing minute.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that will change, don't get me wrong. But you play an accordion, you clog dance, you sort of sing these old folk songs, or you sort of appropriate old poems and news stories and things from archives.
Yeah.
How'd you get into that?
So I was brought up by two people who met at a folk club in the 70s, and I don't know, to me it was never like a strange thing to do, because I was kind of brought up amongst it, and it was only really like, I guess probably when I got to sort of secondary school and realised that no one else did that it was kind of like, okay. So I went to, you know, loads of folk festivals every summer and lots of concerts throughout the year, and then I got to 11, and my mum always used to run like dance teams as well, like clog dance teams, so she taught me to clog dance, but I went to dancing school as well, like kind of did tap and ballet and all that stuff. And then I went with my mum to do a workshop for a young group of dancers in Stockport called the Fosbrooks, and they are like a group of amazing dancers and musicians, and it's basically run like as an after school club by this incredible teacher called Liza Austin at this just one very normal school in Stockport. So we went to do a workshop, and Liza kind of invited me to be a sort of honorary member of this group, and we ended up sort of travelling all over doing gigs, and that's where I started to play the accordion as well. Right. So that was a group of people my own age doing clog dancing and playing instruments. Okay. So it was kind of, I just kind of grew up in this strange bubble where it wasn't weird to do that, I think. And then I started going to like this amazing summer school up in Durham called Folkworks, which is all young people, and then it's kind of well-known, famous folk musicians go and teach there. And then from that, I then learned about these ethno music camps that I was talking about on stage yesterday, which are like these kind of international gatherings of people that play folk music from all over the world, and you go and teach each other. So I think I've just grown up on this very, very specific little path where that happens all the time. And so I never like really thought of defining what I do at all. I just kind of did it until I started a degree in Newcastle. There's one degree in this country where you can do folk music, and that's in Newcastle. And I started that, and suddenly it was just like, I don't know, making it all into a bit of an intellectual game, kind of like trying to define what it is and why we're doing what we're doing. And I found that quite strangling, actually, because their definition of traditional music and folk music, which they kind of seem to lump as the same thing, is that, or was then when I was there anyway, is music it isn't art music that's kind of created by one person at any specific time. It's music that's been sort of absorbed into a group of people and has been through this process of maybe being altered and changed, and this kind of slightly altered new version has been taken on by a group of people. So that's their their definition of folk is music that's been through this process of change that isn't kind of by any one individual, but it's from like a sort of a community of people.
And
which
by
is
definition, you can't write new folk.
Yeah, exactly.
By that definition.
But then I suppose like we sang a song by Sydney Carter yesterday called "Sing John Ball," which probably you'd say is a folk song now because it's been passed through a lot of hands. There's people sing slightly different versions of the words, and we've altered the tune slightly. So, like in that way, I think that is a folk song now, even though we know who wrote it because it's been through this sort of process. But then, at the same time, we were also looking at broadside ballads, and broadside ballads are like old broadsheet newspapers, and they're so when kind of woodcut print first came in, they used to print ballads that people had written that were kind of stories of things that had happened, like news, mad stories about like mythical beasts and stuff like that, anything, and people would stand on the street corners and sing the words to these new poems that they'd written and sell them. And we also used to study those as kind of folk music, but to me they were obviously written by one person. And then they're written down and archived and saved. So in a way, they're not really traditional in that sense, but they're seen as folk. And I think what Grace does is that. She does that. She comments on what's going on now, shouts about it to as many people as she can. And you know, she's acting within this continuing tradition of kind of commenting on what's going on around us and what's going on in kind of ordinary people's lives.
Yeah,
and in that sense, I think she very much is a folk musician. So,
and that's that's what I think is quite interesting. We talked about this a little bit on stage, but in the last sort of I don't know what you'd say, 20, 30 years, like it's sort of diverged into like traditional folk, and then sort of like anything political at all, anything overtly political or talking about politics on stage. It's ironic because you can kind of, among certain folk audiences, you can get away with singing like songs that are about social justice, but if they're like 100 years old, that's totally acceptable.
Yeah.
But if you try and say, you know, oh, have you looked at like the policies that are affecting you know, people in this country today, and how, like, you know, there are policies that are actively contributing to people's premature death in this country because of austerity.
Yeah.
Like, that's seen as something that's really, like, by some quarters, but not by all quarters of folk audiences by a long stretch, but by some folk audiences, that's seen as almost quite uncouth. Like, it's quite sort of impolite to talk about that kind of thing, and that's why I think a lot of them find me a little bit too rough around the edges, I think. But I also think it's coming back, you know, and like, it's the BBC Folk Awards this year. Susie Dent from Countdown was presenting an award. She was obviously, like, talking about the etymology of the word, and she was like, the word folk, like, it literally means of the people, that's all it means.
Right, yeah.
So, like, by that definition, I honestly do think anything can be folk. Like, I think if you're singing the music of the people, and that's why folk music from all over the world, like from different parts of the world, is so wildly different, you know. It's like one of the only genres where, you know, kind of all jazz, for example, it follows a fairly specific formula of, like, the instrumentation and stuff, but, like, folk music from, like, South America is, like, so different from folk music from England, but it's all folk music.
Yeah, that's right. Look, so I grew up in a place called Pontedower, which used to have
it's got a nice folk club.
It used to have a massive folk festival. I think it was the biggest folk festival in the world before I was born in the 70s. But even growing up, like, for the 80s and early 90s, like, we just used to have all these amazing people, these folk musicians coming every year in August from all over the world. You go, you know, they're coming from Kenya, they're coming from South America, they're coming from, you know, Scotland. But they all sound different. Like Welsh folk music to Scottish music sounds different.
Oh yeah, massively.
So it seems really weird for me that there's this sort of culture within folk in Britain that is, like, exclusionary.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I don't think they mean it to be. I just think it's people who are very, very protective of the tradition that they have spent their whole life kind of like preserving and stuff. Do you know there's a singer called Shirley Collins, who was like, she's like kind of a legend of folk.
Okay.
And she was like really huge in sort of the 70s, was it? And then didn't sing for a long time, and then brought out an album this year. Like he's like really, really like strongly celebrated. And we were on at Cambridge Folk Festival this year, and Mark Radcliffe was on the programme. We ended up on a programme that was broadcast on Sky Arts, which was like the Cambridge Folk Festival highlights. And Mark Radcliffe was interviewing Shirley Collins, and he said, you know, so you're a bit of a traditionalist, aren't you? And she said, yeah, I just don't believe that there's any such thing as a new folk song. You can't write a new folk song. It can't be done by definition. And then they literally went, now Grace Petrie with and then like the next thing was like Coven singing one of my songs, and I was like, oh, that's a kick in the guts. I was like, that hurts. But I mean, I don't know, like I don't think that's wrong, you know, like I don't think people are wrong for saying that. It's just different definitions, I guess. I just like, I think the whole thing would benefit. One of the reasons that we set up this folk club in Leicester is that I really think the whole thing would benefit from like a bit more of like an osmosis sort of relationship between like contemporary and traditional, because, you know, the really traditional side of English folk, you know, the audiences aren't translating to younger people at all. You know, like it's quite rare, like among sort of Hannah's band, Lady Maisry, like typically has like much older audiences than I would have for my sort of like my solo gigs, where I will do a bit more kind of shouty, stompy, less talented stuff. And I think like that's something, if we want folk to sort of go from strength to strength and stay around, we've got to like address that. We've got to look at the fact that like for whatever reason younger people are not feeling like they want to or like they're welcome to come into folk clubs, you know, and that is something that I actually have felt before, you know, like the whole kind of, just before we started recording, we were talking about how last night Bristol Folk House, tremendously folky venue, and there was like a small group of like big sort of listeners of mine, big fans of mine, who were like singing along, and there was a lot of people in the audience who were clearly really, really like perturbed by that, really pissed off about that, and it's things like and even I did it when we played in Leicester at our folk club. We had some quite young people in the audience, which is supposedly what we're trying to achieve with this club. Yeah. And they were quite sort of fidgety, and they got up and down quite a lot, and they were kind of going out, and they went out a couple of times during the set. And I was really, not just privately, I didn't say anything, but I was really bad-tempered about it. And I was like, oh, why were they, like, fidgeting so much? What, like, don't they know this is a folk club? And it's so funny how quickly I end up like that, because 5 years ago, you know, I was really daunted, actually, by how reverent the atmosphere at folk clubs is, you know, and, like, not everybody is used to that at gigs, you know, not everybody is used to even, not everybody would expect a gig to be even seated, you know, like, most, for a lot of people, the word gig is, like, a sticky floor in a back room of a bar, you know, and it's totally okay to sort of chatter while the band's on. And that is, like, blasphemy at a folk club, you know, like there's nothing you could imagine that would be more insulting.
Suck crisps if you're eating crisps.
Yeah, definitely.
You can't crunch them.
Suck crisps. God. Sounds like a band name. But yeah, I feel like that's quite a lot of history of folk. I
mean, I'm all up for the history of folk. So you guys, like, I find this interesting, like, and I don't know if this is just the nature of, you know, trying to make a living in folk music, but you both seem to have ton of different projects on the go. Like Hannah, you do your own solo stuff, and then you do Lady Maisry and other things as well.
She does so many things.
Like ridiculous. Like Grace, I mean, you're generally yourself, right? But you're
seldom anything else.
But you're also in Coven, which did very well at the Cambridge Folk Festival this year, and you know you're about to go on tour with like Johnny and the Baptists and Josie Long. How do you? I mean, is it just tough to make a living as a folk musician, or is it like just trying to be?
Yeah, I think.
Is it a creative impulse, I suppose?
Take this one because you're in so many bands. You make me look unemployed.
I mean, I suppose like it's. Yeah, I think it's kind of about striking a balance between like being kind of artistically fulfilled, and then not doing so much stuff that you've got no time to do anything very well. Like I've verged on that line sometimes. But yeah, I definitely think that like if I just did one thing all the time, I would go insane. Like if I just did my solo thing, or if I just did like Lady Maisry, any of them, like I think I'd quickly just lose interest for it. And for me, I guess maybe because like, we were talking about this last night to a woman that was at the gig, and she said, so we met this woman last night she was 40 this year, so she's going to see 40 gigs for her 40th year. It's really cool. And she said she's been to a few folk gigs, and she's always been struck by how friendly and welcoming they actually are, which was great to hear. But I said, and she said, why do you think that is? And I said, well, I think part of it is that it's naturally is social music, like and all the musicians that you see on stage, the way they've learned is by going to sessions and playing with loads of different people and learning from different people and teaching each other and stuff, and that's where it comes from. That's still the culture. And I think when you've come from a culture like that where you go to sessions and you play with different people, it's kind of like it kind of follows on in your like professional career, that you want to play with different people and try out different things. And like I know that I've definitely got lots of different creative sides to me, and like because I dance and sing and play, and I've got interests in a few different styles of mainly folk music, but like different styles of folk music from different places and stuff. And like every project that I'm involved in, I have to switch on a slightly different bit of my brain, I think, to and I really like that. And I've never taken on a project that I was literally just taking on for the money, because everything that I do I actually really, really enjoy doing, and usually for quite a specific reason that isn't really fulfilled in any of the other projects. But it can be difficult, because like a couple of years ago I got asked by this girl called Claudia Schwab, who's an Austrian yodeling fiddle player, but she lives in Ireland, if I join her band. And I really had to think about it a lot, because I was like, oh, I'm really busy. But I said yes in the end, because I just felt like it would really make me up my game in certain ways that I really wanted to be pushed into. So yeah.
I mean, you can't even do one thing when you're doing one thing. Because you provide your own percussion, right, with your feet, which I don't know how you do when you're also resting an accordion on yourself. There's a great moment last night watching the show where you're playing. I think it might have been The Carpenter, where at the start it's the
kalimba.
The kalimba. And then it's the accordion, and you're singing. And then you just kick in with the feet. And I noticed you guys just shaking your head.
I mean, well, I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. You know what I mean? So, like, it literally, the playing of the accordion itself kind of baffles me, because you're like, her like hands are doing completely different things, like working completely independently of each other. So I'm like, okay, that is mind-blowing in and of itself. If I tried to do... Well, I wouldn't be able to do that. But if I tried to do that and then I was like, I'm going to try and sing as well, I'd probably just fall over. And then I'm like, I'm going to try and do that. I'm going to just play some bass with my right foot. And then I'm just going to play some cymbals with my left foot. And yeah, it's funny when you close your eyes when you're at the height of one of your songs, and you could definitely think it's like a 4-piece band or something. It's really quite incredible.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the meat of it then, shall we?
Okay, let's get into the meat of it.
So I'm looking for your fool's gold. Fool's golds.
Okay.
The really popular thing that you don't like.
Okay. Well, I think this might be quite controversial and maybe self-defeating career-wise.
Great.
If this
that's what this podcast is about.
Oh, good. Yeah, good. It's seeking to ruin me. I hate Glastonbury.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I could have done that as well.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do it together.
Let's have a little hate fest at Glastonbury.
Let's go for it.
I need to explain this because it could just come across as very ungrateful. I've played Glastonbury 6 times.
Yeah.
And the first time I went, I think it's been... My relationship with Glastonbury has been like... It's a love affair that slowly turned awful. Right. And then we ended up hating each other. I don't know if it hates me, but I hate it. But so the first time, I should go back to 2010, when I was living in Sheffield, And my girlfriend at the time, we were like really skint. I was working at a bar, the Sheffield Students' Union bar, and both massive Billy Bragg fans. And he was putting on this. He was involved in this play.
Okay.
Called Pressure Drop, which only was on for like a week at the Wellcome Collection in London, and it was amazing. And it was to do with, it was like based on a council estate where the BNP were like gaining a lot of like popularity, and he'd sort of composed the music for it, and it was really great. And we got tickets to go and see it, and I'd at the last minute, I'd like grabbed one of my CDs that was like a homemade CDR that I'd burn on like a PC and like printed off the artwork and cut it out and put it in a like plastic wallet. And at the last minute, I just grabbed it. I didn't think I was going to meet him or anything, but I was like, well, if I went all the way down there and I ended up meeting him, I'd be really annoyed that I didn't have any CDs. So I like grabbed one, put it in my coat pocket. And after the show was amazing. Like laughed and cried, it was amazing. And after the show, I was like in the queue for the toilets, and he just walked past me. And I sort of, and I was so, I know Billy Bragg a bit now. I've met him quite a few times, and he's really cool. He's like, he's absolutely. They say don't meet your heroes. He's absolutely as great as you like think he would be. But I was like, it was like the least cool moment of my whole life when Billy Bragg walked past me at the Wellcome Collection in the queue for the toilets, and I think I literally like. He was coming past me and I was like, it's now or never. And I just took it out of my pocket and I sort of just jabbed it into his stomach without saying anything. And he was like, it stopped him walking. He was like... And then I sort of like rambled some words that were like barely English, and he was like, okay, and like took it, I think, with this like quite like freaked out expression on his face. But I think one of the things that I managed to say to him was, people have called me the female Billy Bragg, which they had already by that point. And he thought that was hilarious, and he like threw back his head and laughed and said, you poor thing, which I thought was quite nice. And then that was it, and that was the end of it. And then about 3 weeks later, I got this email from, it said Bragg Central was the name of the email. And it just said, do you fancy coming and playing some songs in the Songwriter Circle at Glastonbury? And I was like, it was like a dream. I mean, I wasn't really gigging even at that time. I was really starting out, starting out. Just couldn't believe. I can't describe it. Couldn't believe it. It was like I'll never forget it as long as I live. Like seeing that email come in. So I went to Glastonbury, and he got me a ticket and a ticket for my girlfriend at the time as well. And we went, and it was pretty much the first festival I'd ever been to. So the first festival I'd ever been to was Glastonbury, and my first time going was playing. And I got there, and I kind of expected that I'd be on at 6 a.m. and playing to about 3 people or whatever. And I got to Glastonbury, and Billy Bragg was like, okay, so what it is it's called the Roundup. There'll be a few of us on stage together, and we'll take it in turns to sing songs. And it'll be you and me and Frank Turner. I was like, what? So obviously, because I was on stage with Billy Bragg and Frank Turner, there was like thousands of people there, and the tent was absolutely rammed, and it was amazing. And also that weekend, it was just really gorgeous weather. It was like the south of France. It was the one like really hot Glastonbury we've had in the last 10 years. And the whole thing from start to finish was like, it was like if you'd have written a fan fiction of your life. It was like the best it could possibly be. It was the first time I ever played Farewell to Welfare. I played it at left field. Oh, wow. And they just went mental for it. And it was really, honestly, like, most things that have happened in my career I can chart back to that show. Wow. It was like the start of everything for me, really.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
But...
So you might be thinking, what an ungrateful bitch that she's choosing Glastonbury as her thing that she hates. But that was then, and I'll tell you, people who say the weather doesn't matter, you go for the experience, are fucking lying to themselves and to you. Like, going to Glastonbury when Glastonbury is gorgeously sunny and hot the whole weekend, I will take any amount of that, and I would not be talking about it on this podcast if that was the case. That's the only time I've been when it hasn't pissed it down the whole time. And you just don't get dry for like 5 days. You go, you get wet, and you don't get dry until you come home. And I'm too attached to my creature comforts to spend that much time cold and wet. I don't really like camping. People always think that I will because I'm a lesbian, but I like... But you know, like people expect me to, you know, and I sort of should like camping. I like all the gear. I've got a Swiss Army knife.
You like wandering around a camping shop, don't you?
I love a camping shop. I'm anyone's for a camping shop, but no, fucking like camping. And I think actually, if I tried camping in a hot place, I might find that I'm quite fond of it. Yeah. But camping in Britain can fuck off. You know what I mean?
We bought a collapsible teapot, didn't we, last year?
We did buy a collapsible teapot, yeah.
Did it collapse?
Yeah.
Only when you want it to. It's pretty late.
Yeah. I don't think we've ever used it.
No, we haven't. No. We just got it out and showed it to people.
Yeah, when the day comes, we'll be prepared. So yeah, there's the camping element is bullshit. And then as Glastonbury's like gone on over the years, I've just become like more and more disillusioned with it. And then the last time we went, we didn't actually go this year. The last time we went was 2016. And I think what happened was we talked a lot about folk. I'd been ruined by folk festivals. Right. So folk festivals are just supremely well organised. Most of the venues, most of everything is indoors. They have like huge marquees. Yeah. They don't really do outside stages. It's not a thing because folk festivals clocked ages ago
that it rains.
It rains in Britain. Yeah, like it rains pretty much constantly, and you know everyone will have a shit time if they're standing trying to watch a band in the rain. The band will have a shit time. So folk festivals generally are like massive marquees with seats in them. You know, it's like going to an actual proper gig. It's comfortable. Yeah, like everywhere that you can eat, there's like places to sit inside and you don't get pissed on. And by the time I kind of made it back to Glastonbury in 2016, I'd encountered quite a lot of this. And it was like the scales had fallen from my eyes and I could see what Glastonbury was. And you see all this. Have you been?
I have not been to Glastonbury. I think I've said this on this podcast, but I'm not a fan of music festivals in general.
Right, okay, yeah. You should try a folk festival.
Oh, well, obviously, like I mentioned it, like the Pontardawe Folk Festival, that used to be huge. I loved that. I used to like going to End of the Road before End of the Road became what it is now.
Yeah, I've not been in a few years to End of the Road, but I think I'd probably find the same gripes with it now.
Yeah, it's just got a bit big now.
Gets a bit big, I also think, I don't know, I don't want to get too pretentious about it, but I think it's kind of travelled so far away from what it was initially set up to be. So it's like initially this kind of like hippie left wing, like
an alternative. It was an alternative culture festival, and now it is the absolute opposite of that.
Yeah, it's very corporate these days.
So corporate. And I think as well, I should definitely say that like my relationship with Glastonbury is, I think, forever tarnished by the fact that we were at Glastonbury last year when we found out the result of Brexit.
Yeah.
And there was, I would say, perhaps no worse place to find out the result of Brexit if you were a passionate Remainer, as we were, because it was like, so at Glastonbury you have Billy Bragg stage to the left field, which is amazing, and I am honestly so grateful for all the gigs I've had there, and I would never like not want to play there.
Yeah.
But it's like I wish I could take left field out of Glastonbury
and make that,
or just make that the festival,
yeah.
Because it's like you go out of that stage, and honestly, it's just kind of full of wankers now because it's just this thing, isn't it? It's like stag parties and hen parties and like Glastonbury and all of these people who, like Robin Ince has got this great bit about how music festivals have been discovered by twats, and like he was like, you know, there used to be the sort of like sanctuary of like nerdy types to go and like really immerse themselves in like this art that they were really passionate about, and he was like, you know, all of the people, the kind of mainstream people who will like take the piss out of you for liking anything or thinking anything, it's like they've become so trendy that festivals now are flooded with those types of people. And I've never felt that more keenly than I did on the morning of Brexit, because we were like just basically in tears all day.
Yeah.
You know, it was more upset than I've ever been over a general election. Not because I like love the EU or anything, but because, and I do understand, like, I know that there were lots of left wing reasons for voting Brexit. I've got a lot of friends that did actually for left wing reasons, but you know, by the time the vote came along, especially so soon after Joe Cox and stuff, I felt really strongly that it had definitely been made a referendum on immigration and a referendum on whether or not we were going to be a multicultural society or not. And the Leave campaign, had been so obviously, blatantly racist and horrible, and just appealing to the worst instincts, I think, of nationalism and individualism. And I was so gutted that it won. I was so gutted. I never thought, like, it really shook my faith, you know, in the people in this country. And then we were at Glastonbury and everybody just seemed to be acting like they just didn't fucking care. And it was awful. It was just surrounded by just like hedonistic people who definitely have like more money than sense, who were just like fucked off their faces. And I sound like such a killjoy, I know, like, but it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and we were kind of like, you know, us and our mates that we were there with were just totally gutted. And it was like we were in this like shock and grief, and everywhere around us there just seemed to be all of these absolute jackasses that were just like, you know, staggering around drinking Stella at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we were like, this is just the worst thing in the world.
Yeah. And it and other things that like show you how awful it's become and how like capital has become. Like the thing about people buying a whole set of camping gear and then just leaving it in the field. So there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of tents and stuff that just get fucking left, and people have to go and clear it all up afterwards. And it's like, what is with that? Like, A, who can afford to do that? And B, like, why on earth would you do that? And like, but I think part of that is because the infrastructure at the festival is so awful. It's like non-existent. Right. So like, you know, it's a huge site. You have to walk a really long way if you're camping not in an artist bit to get back to your tent. And it was so muddy this year because apparently the tracking that they put down, which kind of vaguely stops the field from getting completely mulled up, had been it had been at Download Festival the week before, and Download had been really muddy, and then it had dried over, so all the tracking was basically buried under a layer of dry mud, and it had taken them an extra week to get it out of the ground and bring it over to Glastonbury. So by the time it got to Glastonbury, there'd been, you know, lorries and set up vehicles driving all over the site for like weeks, and it was just a pigsty, wasn't it? Yeah. And no, like barely any vehicles were allowed on site. So you can sort of partially let people off for leaving all their stuff, because they're going to have to walk across like literally foot deep mud to get out of the site with all their stuff. And like, I just think, why the fuck they earn so much money, Glastonbury. Why don't they own their own tracking? Why do they hire tracking? Why don't they have infrastructure? Like every folk festival you ever go to has proper infrastructure so people can walk about. And it just makes me really sad, because like my mum watches Glastonbury on telly, and she rang me and she was like, oh, it looks really good, you know, I'd quite like to go to Glastonbury. My mum's got 2 new hips and she walks with crutches. There is no way she would be able to go to Glastonbury Glastonbury Shite Festival, because it's not set up with people's welfare in mind at all, and that's so far away from everything that it stood for at the beginning, and like, you know, being a little haven of kind of like alternative thought and like, you know, bounding ideas around about like making a better world. And now it's just like being at fucking Meadow Hall but in a field. That's a big shopping centre in Sheffield, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there was a moment like, that's the other thing I should say about how my honeymoon period with Glastonbury was definitely like affected by the fact that artists camp backstage. So I didn't have any of this, you know, you see people literally camping like literally miles away from the site. It's like it's a walk of miles. Yeah. You know, so you get up in the morning, you go into the arena, and like you're going to walk miles. And if you need a jumper or you run out of beer or anything, you're going to have to walk miles back to your tent. And it's the walk from the parking to where you're camping is just miles and miles and miles and miles. And because the like Hannah said about the tracking this last year in 2016. There was a moment in the end, like it was okay, and they managed to get us driven with all of our, because we had like all of our gear, our camping gear, but then also like all of our instruments, all of our merch. It's a lot. It would be a lot to carry like 100 feet. Like it's a lot to carry miles to your car, and we wouldn't have been able to do it. I remember I was just there was a moment where it looked like there wasn't going to be able to get a vehicle to drive us through the mud to the car, which is a distance of miles. And I was sort of staggering along in this like knee-deep mud, which like so deep that the kind of deep that you put your foot down and your foot sinks to your knee, and then it creates a vacuum around your welly. So you're like pulling each other out of the mud like it's the fucking song. Do you know what I mean? And there was a moment when I thought, I don't like this here. It was like it was a real epiphany because it'd been held up in my mind with so much esteem because it's Glastonbury. As a musician, it's like the thing that you really like aspire to play, and I'm sure that I'll never consider myself like above playing it. I say with quite a lot of self-defeating, like self-disappointment that I'll always play it every time I get asked to play it, and I'll be very grateful to be asked to play it.
Yeah.
But I think like the amount that people pay, the punters, like I would never pay to go. I know that makes me sound awful, but I just think for the amount of money that a ticket is, the experience you get is just so shit. You know, it's just like you pay 200 odd quid to be ripped off all weekend. You know, like a beer is like more than £5. Every meal is like at least 10 quid. Like the whole, and I think it's just the expense of it is prohibitive. Like it does make you can't get around the fact that it is totally bourgeois to go because it involves having like at least I would say 300 quid expendable if you know like that's doing it on the absolute cheap, I would say. Just for like a not great experience, and even then, like, so if you've paid your like 200 quid, I'm nearly done, I promise. You paid your like 200 quid. That's a lot of money, and you would think that would get you entry into what Glastonbury has to offer. You would think so. And the last time we were there, so it was like the Saturday night, and we went to go to a bar down like near Shangri-La, and it was raining, natch. And it was like 1 in, 1 out. There's like bouncers on the bar, and they were like the bar's full.
There was one point where we literally got held in this sort of holding pen for ages, and then we just gave up in the end, didn't we? And went off.
And I just
and then that same night, our friend Toby got called a faggot by somebody. That gives you a bit of an idea about the lovely people that go to Glastonbury these days.
And it's a shame because you do have your kind of like old hippies and old lefties who are really
there are little corners of it that are still like what it was before, like the healing field. That bit is kind of like a bit what it probably used to be, like left field. But these are like tiny little areas in like a massive place,
corporate machine. So I know like that will probably come as a surprise to people to hear me say that, but it was like because you had come from like a lifetime of festivals.
Just folk festivals where people get looked after, and if people can't get from A to B easily, there's like a scandal about it. But also not even just folk festivals in this country, but festivals in Europe as well, and like just smaller festivals that really are genuinely still about the art and about the music. It's not about the experience of
And I just think that's just a con, isn't it? That's just a con. Like, they've sold people this idea that paying 200 quid to be wet for 5 days, to not have it, there is nowhere to sit down. It's as if, it's still, to this day, it's as if they planned it for a climate where rain is impossible. When, like, rain is, like, inevitable. Like, how many times have we got to learn that, like, it's going to rain, guys. It's just going to rain. You've got to plan for it to rain.
It's an amazing con, isn't it, that they've convince people that this is fine.
Defo, yeah. And like, I think seeing it through Hannah's eyes, because that was the first time Hannah had been in 2016. And I'd had this like growing, gnawing disillusionment with Glastonbury over like these successive years that I'd been. But it was like really like seeing it through someone else's eyes it was like an Emperor's New Clothes moment. I was just like, oh God, this is awful. Oh no, this is awful.
I've been naked this whole time.
I think actually, this is bringing it back to me, but when we were stood outside that bar in Shangri-La being denied entry by bouncers and getting absolutely torrentially rained on, and being jostled about by fucking idiot stag party
homophobic abuse
and homophobic abusers. I think I was not sober, And I think I was heard to exclaim, "The Emperor is naked," at all of these people who were queuing up to get into this bar. Because I was like, the moment that I was like, "This is shit," I was so drunk and angry. I was like, "The Emperor's naked." At that point we went to bed, I think. Yeah.
It sounds like a wise decision.
Yes, yeah. It's always time for bed, I think, when you find yourself in a field yelling, "The Emperor's naked," I think. Yeah, time for bed and a look at your life choices, I think.
All right, okay. Let's...
Now we've thoroughly hated
I think maybe... Shall we leave it at that for Fool's Gold? Because I think we've kind of...
Yeah.
We've both spewed quite a lot about that, so maybe we can both do...
I think we had enough, like, hatred for two of us.
It was great. So, I suppose next then is hidden gems. What's out there that you think more people should know about or appreciate more?
Okay, I'm going to carry on the festival theme. Now we've well and truly slagged off a festival, I'm going to give you a fucking awesome festival that everyone should go to.
Okay.
And it's...
Oh, yeah, but then like Glastonbury apparently.
Yeah.
I mean...
It's what happened with Glastonbury, actually. 30 years ago, someone did this podcast. Everybody got in on it.
Okay, you're only allowed to go to this festival if you really like music and aren't going to be a dick.
People.
Yeah, there's a festival called Viljandi Folk Music Festival in a place called Viljandi in Estonia.
Right.
And it's the best festival I've ever been to.
Okay.
They always have a theme every year, so every year it's a slightly different theme. They've had a theme like of dance before. 1 year it was just women. 1 year it was duos. So it's like, and they just book incredible music from all over kind of Europe and beyond as well. And it's in the ruins of an old castle. And Viljandi is quite a small town. Estonia also has the most unspoiled nature of any European country, so it's just a beautiful place to be. And I saw one of my favourite gigs ever there, actually, and it was something that I'd never heard of. Like, you'll see loads of stuff there that you've never heard of, but there's just so much brilliant stuff going on. And it was this, I'm pretty sure they were Iranian, and it was just a trio, a singer, and then two drummers. And they were playing this really, really ancient Iranian music that had been passed down, through generations. And it was just really incredible, like simple, really sparse kind of rhythms on these two drums. And the drummers were completely in sync with each other the whole time. And this singer. And it was just one of the most mesmerising, beautiful things I've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, and I've seen loads of really fantastic stuff there. I think Estonia is a bit of a hidden gem, kind of musically in general.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they have a thing called Tallinn Music Week as well, which is like a big showcasing kind of festival where people go and there's kind of music promoters and bookers from all over the world go and listen. So you can see a lot of great stuff there as well.
Wow.
Yep. So I think that would be...
Estonia's the place to be.
Estonia. And if you want an artist to look out for from Estonia, you should check out a girl called Maria Newt, who does tour in the UK quite a bit now. And she's a fiddle player and a singer. She really inspired me a lot to make my solo show, because she uses kind of looping and stuff. And she plays all these really kind of hypnotic little old Estonian tunes and songs, and they've got this really sort of quite repetitive, quite strange sounding melodies in the Estonian tradition, and she just makes the most beautiful music, and her performance is really kind of mesmerising. She uses a bit of movement and she uses a bit of foot percussion as well, and Maria Newt, she's got 2 albums now and they're both amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I really want to go to Estonia. Frequently going and coming back full of wonderful it is.
It is. Yeah. I even had to have emergency surgery there once, and it still didn't put me off.
There's a way to sour an experience. I'm impressed.
Yeah, but Maria Newt put me up at her house for a week after that, so maybe that's why I'm telling you she's so brilliant.
Not just a great musician, but a great person. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I can add stuff. You're well out of my realm.
Oh, sorry.
Just sounds brilliant. Go to Estonia.
No.
Well, I was just going to see if you had a hidden gem, right?
No, I do. I'm just sitting here trying to decide between a couple.
Okay.
And I feel like we've definitely already talked for way too long. Feel free to cut out like a lot
Most of the Glastonbury
repetitive, repetitive,
all the
like
stuff that might not get you booked back.
Yeah. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen that? Sometimes on Twitter, like people share this like still from The Simpsons, and it's like a newspaper clip of Grandpa Simpson shouting, and the headline says "Old man yells at cloud," and I feel like that's what I just did about Glastonbury. I just yelled at a cloud for quite a long time. I didn't know it was going on as long as it was, but we missed the gig, so I guess we better go back to Leicester. So I will talk about, because you already mentioned End of the Road, so it seems like fatefully, karmically, perhaps, is a better word, sort of destined that I should talk about this, because this is somebody that I discovered at End of the Road. I was at End of the Road, I think it was in 2011. Yeah, it was 2011, so it's like quite a few years ago now. And it was, chucking it down with rain. It was the Saturday night, and I was there with quite a lot of good friends, and we'd all taken refuge in one of the smaller stages, the one that's kind of, I think it's next to one of the bars, just, so for those of you that have been to the End of the Road, you've got the main stage, is the one that's sort of like, it's down the hill, isn't it? Yeah. And so facing that stage, there's like a tent with a bar in it, and they have their backs on in there. And we went in there primarily to shelter from the rain. And then this guy came on stage, who was an Australian singer-songwriter called Darren Hanlon.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of him?
I feel like I know the name, but
so he knows, like, he's toured with a lot of cool people in the UK. So he tours the UK like quite a bit. And he's done some work with like Gavin Osborne, who I've done some work with, who's like also done some work with Robin Ince. Anyway, like just our careers have kind of had interesting like trajectories where we've like worked with a lot of the same people but never actually met for years and years. But he's just one of the most like poetic lyricists I've ever come across in my whole life, and he has this like really lovely like lilting Australian accent, which is just really nice. And I just think he's just one of the most beautiful poetic songwriters I've just ever heard in my life. He's got a song that I relate to a lot, called Folk Insomnia, which is like, as it would suggest, it's just, I think, a song that he wrote kind of like in the middle of not being able to sleep, and just got some really just lovely lines in it, like, I'm going to be a goner before I read all the books I wanna. And like, he's just got a really amazing way with rhyming, which is like, and it's one of my favourite things about a songwriter when they'll take a rhyme in an unexpected way. So I hate, one of the things that I really hate about like mainstream pop music is the just lazy rhyming. Like, you know, it's like there's only a finite amount of rhymes available to mainstream like songwriters who are writing for sort of, you know, the massive and I just think there's so many words to choose from, and it's so delightful to people when you can take a rhyme in an unexpected way. You know, it's one of my favourite things to do, if I can ever do it in my own songs. And and he just does it absolutely amazingly. And he has, he's got an amazing like body of work. He's got loads of records, and kind of ranges from, he's like what. Like, I would compare him to Gavin Osborne, who's based in Bath, who is like a wonderful British singer-songwriter that I've done some touring with. And there's only two artists really that have that same effect on me that they both do, which is that they can make you literally laugh and cry in the same line. Like, literally by the end of the same lyric, it's like it's just turned in a way that you weren't expecting it to turn, and you kind of go from this sort of like, oh, that's so funny, to, oh, that is so moving, I'm literally like crying now. I just think he's absolutely brilliant, and I'm always stunned when people like that far, like, I just think so many more people should have heard of him and should think he's amazing. And I was lucky enough I did a gig with him in Seattle, of all places. So when I went over to Canada 2 years ago, first time I played the Vancouver Folk Festival, and my best pal and I went over, and we also decided to go and try and do a bit of the west coast of the States as well. So we were over in Canada for like a couple of weeks, and then we did, I think, another about 10 days going down. So like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, and then the plan was to get to LA, but we ran out of time. And so Darren Hanlon like lives obviously in Australia. For some reason, I've never caught him in the UK. I've never, like, when he's been touring the UK, I've never seen him. But I really, really wanted to gig with him the day before my birthday, so on the 23rd of July, 2 years ago, 2015. He was doing this gig in Seattle that would just about cross over with the time that we were going to be there. So I got to support him, and then I got to cry all the way through his set. So it was really cool. Yeah, but he's absolutely great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to check him out now.
He has this song. I'll just say really quickly, like, I know I say that, but it probably won't be. He has this song about Halley's Comet, and it tells the story of how he saw Halley's Comet when he was like a little boy, and the story is like told from his point of view as like a really tiny little boy when it was like it passed over his house in 1985, and it's really it's just really cool, really lovely. Yeah.
Awesome. Right. Okay. Let's try and wrap it up then.
Yeah, I think I think that would be wise.
So I'll just ask you like a couple of quick fire questions.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what is your favourite band or musician?
Hannah James. I'd say probably Alison Weiss is my favourite musician, yeah. She's basically what I want to be when I grow up. Okay. She's like, she's younger than me, which is, that's smart. But she's, like an amazing, like punk musician from, I think she's from LA. She lives there now. Okay. Yeah, she's really cool, very cool. Alison Weiss.
Oh, I've got far too many favourite musicians. I can't really pick one, but I'll pick out a girl called Kate Young from Scotland.
Yeah. Okay.
Fiddle player, singer, incredible composer and songwriter. Check her out, she's amazing.
Brilliant. Least favourite?
I mean, anything that's on at Glastonbury, basically.
To continue the theme.
Kasabian then.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. People think I hate Kasabian a lot more than I do because of that line in that song.
Yeah.
But, it's more, I would say it's more what they represent. Mainstream lad culture, which I find tremendously boring.
Yeah.
I mean, I might even go Kasabian. That makes me a terrible Leicesterite. I'm supposed to show some Leicester solidarity with Kasabian, but I think they're doing fine without my approval.
Yeah.
That's what I've. What I've gleaned.
I think they're okay.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I haven't. I don't think it's affected their career massively, my takedown of them. Anyone you hate?
I mean, just... The thing is, if I hate something, I just don't even, like, register what it is. So I can't really tell you what music I hate because I just block it out. So, like, just a lot of music.
TV show?
Favourite?
Yeah. Well, both, but...
Okay.
Green Wing.
Green Wing, good call. I'm like a lifelong, very deeply invested Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan.
Amazing.
I would also heartily recommend that there's a podcast that is two of my favourite lesbians in the world. Jenny Owen Youngs, the musician, and her wife Kristen Russo are doing a podcast where they're watching and then analysing from a mostly feminist standpoint Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah. Every episode in chronological order. It's called Buffering the Vampire Slayer.
I have listened. It's good.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah. It's like the highlight of my week. Honestly, I think it's amazing. Buffy all the way, forever and ever. Amen.
Forever Buffy. Least favourite?
I'm pretty anti Game of Thrones. I considered Game of Thrones for my fool's gold. I've tried to get into Game of Thrones, and I just think I just don't get the hype. I'm not massively fond of the just amount of rape that they're just big into the rape in Game of Thrones. And I was really like, I'll stick with it and try and make it through the rape. But you just can't. There's no other side of the rape. The rape just goes on, and it's not like I'm not so squeamish that I would like not watch something ever again if a rape was depicted. But I feel like I got to the point where I was like, I think there's almost no female character left in this who hasn't been raped. And I just think, come on, like just be a bit more imaginative. You're writing an entire like fantasy, set in a different totally fantasy land. You could just make the you could just be a bit more imaginative than just have it be so rapey.
The horrible thing about the TV show is like the books aren't as bad as that.
Okay.
Like, the TV show set a tone with
Right.
its first couple of seasons, and then felt like it had to keep topping itself.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then, and they've done that not just with sexual violence, but all kinds of gore and horrible. Like, and I just feel like you don't need to. That's not why I was tuning in.
And I'm not someone who's like bothered by gore on TV because I'm quite able to be like, I never feel like it's real.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So things like, even like, you know, the Saw films or anything like really grim like that, it just doesn't really affect me because I'm just like, oh, that's some well done graphics, you know what I mean, or some well done special effects. I'm never like, oh, that's gross and real.
Yeah.
But it does bore me after a while. I'm like, you know, maybe because I'm so desensitized to it, I'm just like, yeah, sure, you've cut another person's head off. Sure, like another river of blood. Can we advance the plot of it?
It's to shock, right?
Yeah.
And so when you do it every week, it's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, we've talked for ages. So there's one last question in this podcast. If someone was going to make the story of your life, what medium would you like them to do that in? And what would you call
tapestry.
it? That is the most unique answer I think I've heard.
To rival the Bayou. I don't know. Sorry, that was just the first thing that came to mind. Okay, cool. Yeah. Oh no, if I die tomorrow, they're going to do it, aren't they? Yeah, the Grace Petrie tapestry. I wouldn't mind a musical of my life. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think I'd have to achieve a lot more before anybody was like moved to do so. So let's hope I don't die tomorrow and end up on a tapestry.
On a tapestry.
Just hating Glastonbury, shaking my fist at Glastonbury. Yeah.
Hannah James.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe a play.
A play, a Hannah James play. Yeah.
Lots of club dancing.
Yeah, you should be a musical, probably.
A ballad opera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Grace and Hannah.
Thank you.
Keep smashing it.
Oh, cheers.
Thanks.
Sorry we talked so long.
Brilliant.
Wow. So that was Hannah and Grace. I loved that interview so much. They were both just so nice and down to earth and honest, actually. But the thing that came across to me in the editing of that interview is just how funny they both are. I don't think I've laughed quite as much hearing an interview for a second or third or fourth time as I have with this one. Both Grace and Hannah are always touring, always gigging, so do look out for where you can see them next. Specifically though, Grace is taking her Lefty Christmas show on tour this year, I think for the first time. It'll be around the UK in various locations in December, culminating in a big gig at the Bush Hall in Shepherd's Bush, London, so do go to that if you can, fill that room out. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do that at thatthispod.com. I don't advertise on this show because it all feels a bit corporate to me, so anything you give literally goes straight into making more of this. There are also rewards for you, which you can read about on the site. As I mentioned at the top, you can help me choose the theme tune for this show. The first 5 episodes all have different music, which I will then repeat over episodes 6 to 10 and 11 to 15. There are 3 ways you can vote. Either by making a comment on your donation to the podcast, by reviewing the show on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, or you can share the podcast on social media, making sure to tag me in at thatthispod. So that I know which episode you want, I've come up with a little code. In the comment on your donation or in the review or share of the show, include the word Ocelot for the music in episodes 1, 6 and 11, Tiger for episodes 2, 7 and 12, Thrush for episodes 3, 8 and 13, Fox 4, 9 and 14, and Falcon for the music in episodes 5, 10 and 15. I'll tally them up, and whatever you decide will be the official Not That This theme music. Of course, if you've got anything else to say, you're welcome to email me too. I'd love to include some letters in the podcast, so if you've got some praise, advice, questions or suggestions, do let me know. The email address is on the website, or if you know how to spell my name, it's Geraint at thatthispod.com. 2 more episodes next week, one with the writer of the BAFTA award-winning BBC drama Murdered by My Father, Vinay Patel. Very excited about that. And the other with the brilliant spoken word artist Dominic Berry, who I met up with in Edinburgh, but we had to wait a little while before I could release it because he's got some exciting news. I'll catch you then.